Why, hi there, it's Uncle Ron, and today we're going to do something a little different. As it's getting warm, it's finally cooled off enough for me to turn the light back on, and the wife has allergies and all that. So today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to talk about not necessarily the worst sports to play on your tabletop, but we're going to count down the big four: hockey, football, basketball, and baseball. And I'm going to try to go through and tell you what would be the most realistic if you were sitting in the park or the arena or the stadium to watch as far as strategy is concerned and gameplay, as in the real gameplay and not anything that you might play on your tabletop or computer. This is not to say that any game you pull out for these four isn't going to give you what you want. I'm talking about there's a difference between, well, let's just start with this. You have to be able to boil down any game or any sport to be simple enough, and that's, again, not a criticism of whatever game or sport that you play, to make it worth your while to want to play. And so, can you make the game, can you turn that sport into a playable game that you want to come back to and play over and over and over again? Now, that's where short play games or quick play games or super highlight play games kind of come in for these. And we're not talking about that, because there are good storytelling highlight games for pretty much any sport imaginable that you'll be able to sit there and imagine how you got from point A to point B. And so that's not what we're going to be talking about here. We're going to be talking about long play games in which sport is best portrayed for what you see on the field. Not for accuracy or anything like that, but the actual gameplay on the field compared to what you could do on your computer or your tabletop. Number 4. Now, on with the countdown. But first, a long-distance request. No, Casey, go away. Hockey would be what I would put would be the least realistic. And again, we're using those least realistic in air quotes. You have a game that is in constant motion when it's going on the ice. And trying to boil that down into either a computer game or a tabletop game, which in a tabletop game doesn't necessarily lead real well to a game to a sport that's always moving. Now, there are lots of hockey games that do a good job getting most things right. And I would say that computers, I'm going to go with Action PC in this particular case, do a good job in trying to get as close to what you would see at a hockey game or what you would be on the ice skating, playing hockey, as opposed to trying to get it right on the tabletop. There's a variety of different ways that you could do hockey. Let me talk about Strat-O-Matic for a second. Strat-O-Matic does a good job of putting you on the ice and making decisions about where you should shoot the puck from, or whether goalies can make saves, or whether good goal scorers can beat the best goalies and all that. Strat-O-Matic does a good job with that in face-off ratings. But there's no icing calls in Strat. There's no board battles in Strat. There's no icing in Strat. There's no shot blocking in Strat-O-Matic hockey. All those things that I just mentioned are key and crucial to the game that you see on the ice. You really can't call super defensive strategies in any real hockey game. You can be conservative or aggressive with your offenses and such. Maybe in Action PC you can kind of fine-tune that. But if you wanted to play the Devils in the neutral zone trap of the mid-90s, you'd be hard-pressed to play that, again, on the tabletop or most of the computer games that I've had. That doesn't mean that any of the long play games are bad. Choose to your taste how many decisions or how little decisions you want to make in a given game. Inside the Crease is probably the closest, but even that breaks things down into a 20-second segment. Again, even the long play games are highlight games. Action PC, 10, 12 seconds per fake fast action card flip inside the crease, 20. I think I forget what Hockey Bones is, but you know where I'm going with that. And so you can get close to it. You can get the real highlights and the nitty gritty, and then pick it up in bits and chunks. But realistically, you aren't going to see too much a Bobby Orr carry the puck up, or a team take its time to set up on the power play to do that. You have to boil that down to a point where it's playable and realistic. And again, every game has its strengths and every game has its weaknesses, so we're not going to pick on games that can't do it. It's just really hard to do in hockey just because the elements of it are so complex. You would not ever want to play a game that you had to make 300 passes in the course of a given game. That would be too much, but that's what happens in a hockey game. Again, computers can make that easier to do than on the tabletop. Depends on how long you want to play the players for. Again, I think Action PC of the computer gets it close, but not necessarily the whole enchilada. So I think hockey is the hardest to replicate. Some games have certain strengths other than others, but no one card and dice game has all those strengths with it. Again, you have to. It's not a fault of the game. You have to make the game playable, and you want to be able to sit down, and you don't want to take 2.5 hours to play a hockey game. And so I would put hockey of the big four the hardest to get right on the tabletop. Number 3 on our countdown would be baseball. Hard to believe, because in all baseball games, except for like Basic App or any of the other basic short play or longer play games, it's your decision to bunt, it's your decision to steal, it's your decision when to walk a batter, it's your decisions to who to put in the lineup and this, that, and everything. But the one thing, if you were sitting in the ballpark, that you can't do really in any baseball game that I've ever seen is a huge piece of the strategy that's missing, which is the actual pitches. What you throw, where you throw it, what do you do on a certain count, who do you kind of pitch around to, what do you do in certain things in the count. That is the cat and mouse game of baseball. Baseball games, which is the oldest of all the four, do things really well. They boil things down to one pitch, and then you resolve the play, and then evolve your strategy around after for that one pitch. Do you steal? Do you bunt? What do you do with your infield? What do you do with your outfield? Do you change your pitcher? Blah, 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 blah. You know, we've all played baseball. We all know that. And again, there's the more advanced the game or the master game, the deeper you can get with those decisions. But they're all missing, what do you throw? Now, that's all baked into to a degree in the card, so you got a high ERA pitcher. The card's not going to be very good. The closest I would think would be, and you can go pitch by pitch in Action PC if you wanted, but you can't tell it what to pitch, which is a huge thing. You know what the closest thing is? MLB The Show. Because you can paint corners, pitchers are rated, whether it's realistic or not, that's up to you. But location and what you throw in certain counts is a huge part of baseball. You can't replicate what the 2004 Red Sox did to opposing pitchers. Yes, they can hit and all that, and in 2003 when Bill Miller won the batting title from the 9-hole. But what you can't do on the tabletop is replicate the fact that they looked at a lot of pitches and fouled a lot of pitches off. They knew how to work up a pitch count. And that is huge strategy in baseball. Keep the pitcher moving. Get the pitcher off balance. You can't step out when a pitcher's ready to pitch. That's not as much of a factor today with the pitch clock and all that. But that cat and mouse game of making the pitcher make their pitch, or getting an over-aggressive batter to swing a crap, that's not in any game that I know of. And if it was, would you play it? Would you want to take 2 hours to play one baseball game? Baseball games on the tabletop and on the PC are really designed for longer-term projects. Single team 162. Some people, they play out every game, or quick sim every other game, or what it is. It's really not meant to be a one-off or a two-off. I mean, you can play it any way you want. But it's meant to be, designed to be the marathon, with however you want to run that marathon there. And again, baseball on the table is really the quickest of the four sports to play in a long-term thing. And it's designed to be that way. You can battle off a 3-game series in the time it takes to play a good football or basketball game. However, you're giving up a lot of what makes baseball, I think, an interesting sport. I mean, you can get the results on the cards and strikeouts and that, so a Randy Johnson or a Nolan Ryan or a Roger Clemens, you could picture in your mind when you get there for a strikeout, but you don't know whether it was a swing and strikeout or a strikeout looking. And again, those are things. The intimidation factor of that, or watching a pitcher get intimidated. To me, that is something I'm not sure you could ever replicate again. The closest I can think of was the old micro league and pro league baseball back in 1994, where you could choose for your one pitch at bat what you wanted to throw: fastball, curveball, changeup, slider, or duckler, or whatever. And I'm sure behind the scenes, because you can do whatever you want with a computer, it changed around the formula for what your success rate was, depending on the pitcher and the batter and all that. Again, how would you do I know there are a couple pitch-by-pitch games out there, but how would you do that and make it worth playing more than once or twice? That's the thing. If you know that you can get a full play game in and resolve all 80 plate appearances over the course of a given game in a half hour, are you really going to do all that and take an hour and a half to 2 hours? Now, when I stream Action PC Baseball, it takes an hour because we're chatting most of the way through it. That's a 35-minute game. So I would put baseball at number 3. Again, I'm not saying that any of the games are bad. I'm saying I'm not sure there'd be enough interest in sitting there going, okay, it's a 1-1 count. Do I have Orville Redenbacher throw a curveball to Babe Ruth here? And again, if you were to do it, let's say on the tabletop, how many pages of charts would you have to resolve that? How would you grade it? Like payoff pitch, I think, does the closest on the table with when you get the result. Pitcher get his pitch, batter get their pitch. Stratus, the 50-50 payoff pitch, has the different, depending on the pitcher's role. So you can get that for the decisive pitch, but not for the entire at-bat. And pitchers who waste pitches on an 0-2 count drive me nuts. But that's a story for another day. Number 2, I would say, is basketball. There are some very good basketball games out there on both the PC and the tabletop that do a very good job that shows you what you would see and the strengths and weaknesses of every player. You bring it up. Now, like hockey, it is a constant action game. But even with basketball having roughly between 180 and 200 shots and blocks and rebounds and all that, you can picture the whole game in your mind. And if you know the players halfway decent enough, or even if you don't know the players, you can see it in your mind's eye. Someone who should be taking a 3, taking a 3. You can see how the defense would cover a player. You can see the strengths of an individual defense or how weak they might be, how resistant a player might be to shot, what they're going to do if they do a penetration shot, a dribble drive in the paint. That's all there. The only thing that I would say in basketball, maybe the only weakness would be in a game would be timeouts. Does a timeout mean anything in a tabletop game or a computer game? Some games do stopping the momentum of another team if you call the timeout in the right spot, which is why you call it on the floor. But I think if anyone pulls out a long play basketball game They're going to get a very, very good representation of what you would see if you were sitting in the arena paying attention to what was going on. The momentum swings, the good players, the play developing on the floor. Is there a button marked pick and roll? No. Do you need to know what a pick and roll is, though? No. I mean, the only thing missing is you're not setting screens. But even in college games, in some computer games, maybe even in some of the college designed tabletop games, you can do zone defenses and that instead of the straight man-to-man, which is what the NBA was for the longest time. So I really do think that the tabletop representation or computer representation for basketball is pretty faithful to the what you see on television or at the arena, which means that a number one might be the hardest to play, and I think they go hand in hand, and that's football. Football is chess. It's 11 on 11 chess. It requires the most thought. There's a reason why head coaches, for real, sleep in their offices the weeks before games, just trying to figure out what can I do to get around that. And so what does a tabletop or a computer football game do that so replicates real football so well? It's matchups. It's all about the matchups. You look at second season football. You look at season ticket football. The play calling may not be as complex. No 65 toss power trap for you to matriculate the ball down the field, boys. But if you're calling a run and you're flipping the card or rolling the dice to see where you're reading off from, and this is in St. Patrick's matchup football, college football too, you're looking to see, does the right tackle make the block? Does the quarterback read the blitz? Does the blocking back make the block? Did the wide receiver get off the line of scrimmage? Was the blitz able to was the safety able to get through the line to make the blitz? All those things that can be abstract or full play are there in a football game. You have the full experience of that. The lines matter. The mismatches matter. How you pick them apart matters. How you think you have picked it apart and had the defense come through or the offense break down is there. How well do you adjust when things don't go well? I'm still amazed that Bill Walsh, when he was with the 49ers, scripted the first 15 plays of a game. They weren't all successful plays, but what you call on 3rd and long is going to be different from what you call on 1st and 10, for instance. But he scripted his first 15 plays, which would be roughly every play in the first quarter, because you get about 60, 65 plays in a game. I'm amazed they could do that. So how do you adjust? How to when things go right and when things go wrong? In some games, do a real good job with fatigue. Others, I think, kind of do too much with fatigue, but that's not for here nor there. So I think one of the reasons why people kind of shy away from longer play football games is that learning curve is pretty high. You look at a game like a 2nd and 10 or Action PC or even Strat to a degree, and you can go pretty deep on what you want for your defensive calls. I mean, Action PC, I think, is the most complex football sim there is out there. The last version was pretty good, by the way. You want to call your defense and send your blitzers and all that, it makes a difference. Pro strategy football, although not the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Accurate sim in the world, although it is very fun and realistic, does a good job of walking you through just how much those players matter. And even, games like Solitaire Pro Football, which has a generic defense, you still get to call for sacks and fumbles and interceptions and who makes those plays, and the strength of the defense comes through because you can knock down ratings and you can see where a good defense would come through. Second season, again, individual matchups. Did the left defensive end able to get off his block I mean, that's what you see in a football game. You may not recognize all that. I mean, I'm not a football guru by any stretch. I know when the corner falls down and the receiver makes a good catch and runs for a touchdown, that the defender blew his play. That's okay. But so I don't play a lot of defense when I play football. I usually just generally concentrate on the offense. But again, every player matters to some extent. And in second season, you can have 2 or 3 depending on that. In second and 10, a blocker can make all the difference in the world. It's spring you for an extra 5 yards. So yes, so I think that to sum up, football of the big 4, I think plays the closest to what you actually see if you were there closely watching on television or sitting in the stands. Again, all of them do a good job trying to do something very difficult. Take a complex sport. Every sport is complex of those 4 and boil it down to something that is easy to learn, easy to understand, and fun to play. Because who wants to struggle trying to figure out how to play a game? That's why I also think that football has the hardest learning curve of the 4. Now, games will give you a hand in trying to figure out what it is you want to do. I know there's a solitaire play calling system for Solitaire Pro, for season ticket football. I think second season has one. Action PC holds your hand really, really well what you should be calling in any given situation. And I think that the other thing that all the football games do is adjust to when you're trying to either hold on a lead or make a furious comeback. So to go through again, in the order of least faithful, and again, doesn't mean bad, just means it's really hard to do, to most faithful, if you were sitting there watching on television, paying close attention, or in the stadium, paying close attention, I would say hockey's the toughest of the 4. Baseball, simply because you're missing the pitch-by-pitch aspect, which is so much of the game's strategy, would be number 3. Basketball, number 2, and only because football, I think, does such a good job replicating what is supposed to be happening on the field. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts. So thank you very much. If you think that I'm an idiot, which probably some of you do, let me know in the comments, because I always love to read those. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a good night, everybody.